Welcome to the Magus Talk podcast. My name is Ari, with my cohort Jay, having casual conversations on all matters esoteric.
We're here to discuss, I wouldn't say more important matters, that's all relative, depends on where you're coming from. But I think, and I continue to think, anywhere I express myself online or even privately at this time, unless nobody cares about esoteric stuff, but wherever esoteric stuff is involved, I will say that people have enough experience who've been into this for decades, and they've been into it in the same way I have, at the same level that was popularized, where it was good enough to instill a kind of inner progress, where people have progressed, where people have become, I wouldn't say super enlightened, but there's been transformation that you could look back and I'm not the same person I was. And a lot of people, more people than we think, are probably at that, where they've engaged with it. They may have been disappointed. It doesn't matter. They may have come back to it, but the ones that really have a spark, where in the past there was so much repression, you were either branded crazy or demonic. You know, these days it's much more accepted, for better or worse. That's not necessarily a good thing. But I think it's needed. And it's got to be risky to a certain degree, because if you make it too correct, if you actually express something, this is instinctive. I mean, people who have an intuitive sense of esoteric truth, or something that might help others, or some knowledge that would be beneficial in some way, can withhold it, not because they consciously chose to, but because there is a threat. That knowledge will not be out there, or there will be hell to pay by somewhere, by fate, by the sacrifice. When you mentioned sacrifice last time, somebody might say, what do you mean, sacrifice? Who are you to be a sacrifice? Were you involved in a cult of some sort? Who was sacrificing whom? And what is this phenomenon? Is it something that's prevalent? And I think we both have seen that it is prevalent. And it's going on almost, whether it's spontaneous or whether it's pre-planned or whether it's a conspiracy, local or global or whatever. Sacrifices are a thing. And you even see it in the Judaic religion, where Yom Kippur, there's two kinds of sacrifices. One of it is, well, we take the lamb and we slit its throat and give it to God, basically. So no life on earth for you. The other one is, you can stay on earth, but we're going to dump all our sins on your back and you can carry them. So you're going to be blamed for everything, punished for everything. We can just go and party and do whatever we want. And we'll keep dumping on you as we keep sinning. And hopefully we'll keep disaster from. How long can that last? But anyways, it's something that I'm sure you noticed, and that's another thing that made an impression, was that you did notice it, that it wasn't some flip out, that you didn't go into cardiac arrest or in deep denial like many people do. It's amazing that if somebody especially is cultivating or performing occultism or doing chronic Tai Chi or even taking drugs, they're almost the same, or meditating intensely, they can reach a point where the psyche becomes more flexible and they can have input. So if their possibilities open to horizons that to them seem like an abyss, it can almost be damaging. So there needs to be an awareness that goes, okay, well, I want to supply information that can take some people to the next level, so to speak, even though that level might not be anything special in somebody's intellectual imagination. You're not going to be flying through the air, or you're not going to be throwing boulders around. It's more subtle than that. But there comes a point where, when you move through, it's like in martial arts, in Tai Chi, you learn these forms that are rigid, and then you can let go. You know, then you can become, because you have a foundation. You're not going to be derailed. Your treads are actually on a track, and this track, you can lay it step by step. It's not predetermined. It's just that you need a track not a specific track, just track to be able to be stable and move. So something like muscle memory for Tai Chi, for example, or the memory of mantric vibration, in another way, or even awareness states that you get in meditation, or even chemically or whatever. All of these things add to a sense of being able to shift one's context of being and opening up to the environment. You're opening up to these levels of your thoughts are not what they used to be. You're thinking differently. So one way to visualize that is thoughts are coming like waves from a radio transmitter. So you're picking up whole different frequencies. You're picking up, and that's frequencies of perception. It's how your mind works, but it's also events. And if you don't have a coherent stability and axis of presence, so to speak, if you don't have tracks in your life of some sort, for some people it's a moral code. For some people it's some kind of faith, but you need something that has got your back by its very nature and is not going to collapse on you. So it's not just you floating in the void. You need to have ground under your feet. It can be the planet itself. It's supposed to be the planet itself. But also the mind can use all these things and everything else because we're compromised these days in so many ways that whatever empowers us, it is in our best interest to not ignore it. So all of these structures, that's one thing. And the more I think about this, of what, and it's not people need this because I'm a crusader or whatever. No, something's going on. And there's no way it can be conveyed directly. I will not go around saying, oh, this is happening and that's happening in a clear manner. If you have ears to hear, if you have the intuition that can grasp this, you can come to your own conclusions. Everything else is as normal as can be. And any occultist or esotericist knows that the microcosm and the macrocosm are linked, which means whatever truth can come forth in cultivating your human potential as an individual also applies to the world. It applies to families. It doesn't apply just you and the world. It applies to you and your family, you and the neighbors, you and your religion, you and your country, various systems of collectivity. And most of these are even artificial. Even you and your TV show, even you and your favorite book or something like that. All of these are relationships. And instead of focusing on changing yourself or changing the world, focus on the relationship. That's where level 2 came in the jinn work, for example. So anyways, we're diving into that area.
Anyway, to like just, 100% agree that, what we did with the genies from the beginning up until now has improved my life and my relationships. Not all of them, but the ones that needed it. And I can't really give a whole lot of detail right now.
No.
I'm surrounded by people that are listening.
Exactly. And that's okay. I mean, like I said, we can keep the personal stuff to a minimum. And the main thing is
we're going to have to right now.
We're going to have to. And the main thing is to get back on track. I don't want to just spill out methodology of cultivation and if you discipline yourself, because most of the success in esoteric accomplishment, all of this comes from how you do it. It comes from the art of it. It doesn't come from the follow the list of actions from point A to point C. And yet, for most of us, that's the only place we can start. Unless you're an artist or even a philosopher or a poet or somebody who likes to paint pictures with the imagination or a performer or anything like that, then you can get a feel, because like learning a musical instrument, it needs to be organic. I was watching this other YouTube video where somebody said, she was commenting on the this breakdancing thing in the Olympics where some big deal is like, what's this? And some Australian woman was just like wriggling on the floor like a maggot, and calling it breakdancing. And it was like, how could this happen?
I think the world is going collectively insane. But anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Well, this was basically somebody who had read everything about breakdancing and then broke it down into some strategy and then how to move in and turned it into like a martial art. And and is like, yes, and there are people like that who play piano, the announcer said, or play any musical instrument, and they suck. They will never learn. They'll get frustrated and they'll drop it, because somebody who really is good at the music is just going to pick up the instrument and start messing around with it. And they're not going to think about the strategy of what to press first and what to do, because the feedback of the music is so enjoyable, or just the act that they can actually do something like that. Get into it, and all of a sudden, wow, I'm actually creating this cool sound, and it's me doing it, and I'm doing it in a way that I'm not keeping track of it. It's happening on its own in this wondrous muscle manner. And it's almost like a miracle, but then the other mind goes, well, no, it can't possibly be that way. So if you suck and if you have no connection and no intuition, you're going to try to force a result by designing one analytically. And it's going to fail. And that's how a lot of people approach life. And that's how our whole education system is and everything. It's mapping out, and it will never work. And that's the big talk about evil people in the world. That's their big drawback. They cannot be naturally intuitive. For them, intuition is just another form of computation. And why do I bring this up? Well, these can be anybody in your life. They can be in your personal life. People who contradict whatever you stand for on a deep level. People who do where you can't really understand how you can coexist with such a person in the world without seriously compromising yourself. Now, this is not a call to conflict. This is not a call to antagonism, or that you are going to be opposed unless you stand up and all of this. This is a call to discernment. Because unless you really have a sense of what is my grounded reference frame, what is the background of everything I consider in life, and how do I consider that within that background? What are my principles? You're not going to base your evaluations on somebody else's principles, or because some authority told you that you better believe in this because otherwise you're threat. Now that in itself proves that it's unreliable. Nobody threatens when it's going to work anyways. Only when they want to force you in because they benefit from it in some strange way. So there is in all of this a sense that, because many intuitive people, and you probably see that as well, are almost desperate for something, a sense of meaning, that at the same time they're not getting it. And because they're not getting it, perhaps some of them will at least step back and go, okay, maybe the problem is, like a guy wants to flirt with a girl or something. So he has to not push it, right? He has to read the room. He has to, adapt to the situation, and then give the individual what they like, what they want, and basically blend in their own personality into that without any hypocrisy, just being genuine, because it comes naturally when you let it happen. But if you don't trust life, and even more, if you don't trust existence on a deep level, because you only trust it when you know that you are a part of it and it's a part of you, then the trust is natural. It's almost like kin. You and existence are kin, well, because you're the same. Existence is, you exist, but everything else relates to you as well. You're not separate. So you and existence are bonded together, and you and the rest of existence are bonded together through relationships. And these relationships are energy. So you can see all relationships, all interactions as energy. And it may not seem rational, but what it is, well, they create a sensation, right? They create a happening. Perhaps they create events. Perhaps one type of relationship brings you good fortune. Another type of relationship makes bad things happen. So relationships can also be causal to events, of course. One type of relationship makes you feel good, the other type makes you feel bad, and everything in between. And these relationships are energy. And because you feel, they are also perceptions, sensations. What else could it be? Unless you relate to something, it doesn't exist. It's that simple. And you can just look into it. It's just a very, very basic. Try to think, okay, I'm not relating to this at all. Does it exist for you? Is it in your field of being in any shape or form? Because if you can't relate to it, then it's alien, it's either completely invisible and gone from your consciousness, or it's evil. And this is something a listener might have to think about. Because why would the alien be evil? That's almost a prejudiced point of view. The other side of the track is evil just because it's the other side of the track. Well, all the sides of the track that most people think about are not alien. We have everything in common with other human beings. We can have children with human beings of the opposite sex. And so we are of the same species. So the word alien shouldn't even come. I mean, we're family with every single person on Earth. And that extends to other life forms. We're family with all the mammals. We're just not brothers and sisters. We're cousins. Then with the plants and the insects and everything, it's an extended biospheric family. But if you have, and the Earth and the sky are both part of that. They're like the containment of it. They're the context of it. So there is no alien there. And even if you absorb energies from the cosmos, it still extends. It's the cosmos. This cosmos penetrates this planet. All of the energies of the fields and the forces of the universe, they're not kept out of here. We're not shielding them out. Yeah, the intensity that would fry us, that's kept out, but not the actual patterns themselves. Everything is like, it's almost like, well, the density of biological happening, and for awareness to ground into it and for energy to ground into it, that's another thing. But as far as contact with the universe, there is no isolation. Maybe on higher dimensions or something, but not immediately. So alien is a human conception that may or may not, I don't think anything alien can approach anything else at that level. If there's too high of contrasts of existential separation, again, I use the word existential separation, where you have nothing in common. When you read H.P. Lovecraft, you really have nothing in common with those monsters, with these elder gods, these Cthulhu, or, the underworld that are out to turn humanity. He doesn't even explain what are these guys going to do. They're going to eat us, and they're going to turn all our dimensions inside out so we go insane before we're eaten, and basically everything horrible you can imagine. Why? Because it's alien. No other reason. And it's that. If it's alien, that means it's existentially disconnected. That the only way you can get from here to it is to pass through death or destruction or total annihilation or dissolution. There is no bridge. Your mind can say there's a bridge, but if it's alien, then it will automatically contradict everything you are. So your belief of life and love and meaning to it, it will present it as the most evil, vile, disgusting thing possible and a threat to its own existence. But all you see for it is destruction and desolation. Which one is right? Well, you are. Your sense of life is the right one. It's not like because this isn't prejudice, this isn't bias. What it is your deep heartfelt sense of meaning vibrates in such a way as to attract whatever is similar in the essence level, not similar in appearances. If you confuse the two, then you've lobotomized yourself. So to reconstitute your own brain, your own forward thinking, it is best to forget about appearances and just go into essence and be able to distinguish that. Now, that alone is very difficult for people because you said it yourself, and you were pretty hard on yourself when you were like, yeah, you tried to tell me, Ari, and I didn't listen and all of this, and even you gave up until you just tossed me away into the ditch and left me to rot, until Dana came and saved me from the heavens. And yes, but what I realized was eventually you would figure it out. You were just not ready to figure it out then.
Right. And I think that, I know that the genies knew that as well. They knew something was going to go down, but maybe they had it all planned. I have no idea. Maybe my familiars had it all planned. I had no idea. But there was no talking to me before that. So,
I can suggest something that the genies may have thought in this case, because the genies are not independent intelligences from our. Let's put it this way. Let's backtrack. I formalized the 4 levels of jinn work, because there was a progression. You couldn't just stay at the level of, okay, we're starting this and it's psychological. Well, that's a little non-occult. I mean, that's not even magic. What does that have to do with anything? But the very intelligences, the inspiration, the almost following your bliss, so to speak, or following your heart, or following your higher self or your intuition, would always say, no, this is the right way. You got to start from here. And it made sense. If you can't handle your own, what's going on in your head, you can't handle anything. If you can't handle then what's going on in your head, then you got to move to handle what's going on around you and your relationships and your social conditioning and in how you other people influence you and other things influence you and your habits, extending your psyche beyond your own subjective into interactions. And that's the second level. And there you learn to interact with the jinn and you learn to trust them there. And then from there, you move into the level where we are jumping off through, which is level 3, which is collective level stuff. There, you are working with archetypes because you cannot handle billions of people in your head. You cannot handle all of this. They have to be filtered out, like a noise filter, to take out the frequencies of everybody's ego and just leave what we all have in common, which is called an archetype, depending on how it expresses. You have archetypes of passion, archetypes of laziness, whatever. But hatred, I divorce it from all of that. I basically do not consider hatred the opposite of love. I don't consider hatred as part of creation. And I'm talking about real psychopathic, destructive hatred that has no, if you see it in people, it has no, how shall we say, reason to be. No excuse. Hatred, and I wrote this, it's hatred is impersonating self-interest. It pretends that it's all about self-interest. Well, I'm just looking for my own interest. I'm just, trying to keep the cheddar flowing, keep the whatever, keep my life going. I'm just doing what any normal living being does, just trying to survive and doing the best I can. Whereas really, it's all about destruction. Getting a satisfaction of domination, because domination means you destroy, you invalidate. You want to invalidate creation. Now, this is insane. To any normal, rational person, this is insane. Unless you're a psychopath yourself and introspect to the level that you actually confront this core. And then you want to ask yourself, is this really the center of me? I'm just this destroy everything, and you hate everything, and everything else is just a facade? Or is the real me under all of that? Is that a football pile up on my soul that I need to, now that I'm aware of it, I can just dig through it to find my true self? And most of us have a true self underneath, as long as we're willing to dig through that darkness, so to speak, that murkiness, that where it's uncertainty, existential uncertainty, because something is interfering with who you are. That's the thing. The shadow in itself is simply an emptiness where nothing's there. So you could actually go and rest with your awareness. It's the coolness and all of that. There's nothing. But the problem isn't the dark room. The problem is who's hiding under the bed. So within your shadow, that level of your subconscious, which normally should just be a cool space of rest, there are malevolent, parasitic something or others. Their forces, their influences, their entities, whatever are they, but they still have that influence. The genies have been maligned and scapegoated, the jinn, for example, as being the same. But look, it's like saying it's a generalization. So jinn are beings of energy. They're beings. If you take away your chemistry and your materiality, you're going to have energy left. And so this energy, can be sustained within the planetary field or within the solar system field at various levels. This energy doesn't dissipate and disappear. It's there, everything, nothing's lost. So this energy is what these genies are about. And because it is energy, it's beyond it travels the speed of light. So you have relativistic, there is no time. They exist in a timeless space. Space is contracted to the point that you're everywhere at once. Their awareness is not embodied. However, when they approach humans, they get to experience embodiment or a form of embodiment. So what the familiars are is their extension into you, into your embodiment that becomes part of you. And then you can actually go, oh, I'm also part of it. I was always this genie. This genie is a part of me, but that's just the central intelligence, and the familiars where we're contacting each other. It's like a brain outside of your brain, only you have 72 of them, and they all complement each other. And now we can play with them like chords on an instrument, putting them into certain patterns and stimulating them through our awareness, and they manifest something completely different than if you would have summoned them one by one, according to the offices. We don't even know what they're going to manifest. However, they seem to say, no, this is the way to do it. Because if you do it, for example, if you manifest 8 genies at once as a cross on the circle where they are situated, they complement each other like they should, like a cross. It's almost like a stable formation, and it addresses certain issues. Like the first cross will address issues of how can your chi, your life force, your breath energy, ground into the body in a way that it can conduct higher consciousness. How can you charge your chi in a way that you can expel your breath and project it out into the ether so it can charge the air in front of you or something else? Or you can even draw a geometrical figure in the air like a triangle and blow your chi into it and then have it manifest as something somewhere else. You can place a symbol within the triangle, and then the chi comes into the symbol and animates it so the symbol comes to life. You can draw a picture. And the AI is pretty good with that. You go and you basically describe something, a person, a god, a goddess, a wizard, and the AI will give you like samples of what it could be. And if you do it right, like pick out a really cool goddess and whatever fantasy scenario, divine scenario, however imaginative you are, that the AI can pick it up and send it back to you in a satisfactory way, you can practice the technique of the golem. The technique of the golem basically is that bring the image to life. It's not a genie. It's just a fabrication of something out of your own imagination, but that means something to you. A symbolism or an image, or whether it's the divine feminine or some quality or an adventure quality or Indiana Jones or whatever, you can bring it to life. But if you do, it can go sour unless you know what you're doing to keep a balance. Because if you bring it to life, then you're going to have parasitic entities from the environment just latch onto it and try to turn it into them. And then it'll attack you. And I'm talking about a presence. For example, let's say you're some otaku Japanese guy who's lonely and he wants a waifu or a digital wife, and he goes and concocts it up in some 3D animation thing or whatever, and has an image, and then meditates on that image, and then imagines it, and then imagines being with it. And it's the old myth of Deucalion. There was once in ancient Greece a sculptor who was so into his art that he just didn't like women. He wanted to create the perfect one. So he sculpted this beautiful image And it became so lifelike that he couldn't part with it, because back then they also colored the marble statues. So this was this lifelike marble statue of the most beautiful woman that he could imagine. It was beyond anything. And he was just dying because he didn't want to eat or anything. So he prayed to the goddess Aphrodite. And this guy was on the island of Aphrodite, Cyprus, which is the island of copper. And there's so much symbolism with copper and channeling energy and the light body. Copper is almost, and bronze are shining, and they were the next to gold. I mean, they were like a lower form of gold and silver. So it's like your energy body. It's not your higher spirit. It's not your super awakened soul. It's your energy body that's closer to the physical, but it still channels light and presence. So this kind of thing, this guy basically created this image, and this was a 3D statue, and the goddess brought it to life, and they even had children. So there's also the story of the woman who went to Tibet, some theosophist who visualized a monk. These Tibetans had an exercise. Just visualize this monk, a generic monk. He doesn't exist, out of your head. Visualize him and talk to him and have conversations and eat with him. She did this, and eventually he would follow her. She could see him, and eventually other people could see him. And by the time other people saw him, like he was regularly there, it was like beyond apparition. They could see him. And he started becoming sinister. From being this jovial monk, all of a sudden he was turning evil. He looked like he was plotting, and he wouldn't go away. And then he became aggressive and, started making people feel bad. And the other monks had to all get and meditate. And it took them a lot to be able to exercise, to banish, to dissolve this awareness. So individuations on that energy level are neither rare nor some crazy, you have to be God to create it. All you have to do is basically open your awareness and share your energy to something that's an ideal to you, and it opens up and things just come in and fill in the mold. Because you already have entities that are elementals. They call them elementals. Basically, they're different frequencies of expression of nature spirits. And these all want to be individuals too in the future. They're like, wow, this is cool. We can all get together and create this symphony, and it's actually like a being. And then they realize that they have a higher self that's already there. That interaction of all these entities that came together all of a sudden are, oh, we are actually this God who wanted to remember himself. So these levels of intelligence where nature becomes a living thing, colonized by living things that are part of it, but each living thing contains the whole. And then we get into mystical territory. But is there a way that involves a minimum of cultivation? You don't have to meditate on a mountaintop for 50 years or go through hardships, especially now. I don't believe it, but there are certain standards of principle that need to be upheld in order to maintain coherence. Otherwise, it becomes blurry karmically. Otherwise, there's interference in the mind because you're not solid in your decisions. I'm not talking about being rigid and judgmental. I'm talking about being certain. So if you're certain about who you are, non-verbally, but basically knowing that, no, that's not me. That's not for me. That's not me. This is for me. And do it in such a way that it actually makes sense. So you need a mystical understanding that's non-judgmental and non-dogmatic, but you also need a certain sense of maturity to go like, look, you don't have anything to prove to anybody. You don't need to get revenge on anything. It's a con job anyways, because we're so weak and snowed that we're being deceived as to what reality is, as to who we are, and it's always bad news. And that's the problem. Christianity has this thing called the Evangelion. And the Evangelion basically means good news. What's the good news of Jesus Christ being born today and all of that stuff, But so it's something like that. Yeah, it's good news. You're not in a hopeless scenario. You don't live in a matrix that's artificial. You're not some alien's petri dish experiment. Whatever happens in as far as conspiracies, That's par for the course. Everybody's always going to be planning and plotting and doing whatever on various levels. But what can you do about you? Because you can't confront anything unless you're living up to your potential. As we said in the last one, be all you can be.
Yeah.
But more importantly, be all that you already are. I mean, be all that you want to be. Your aspirations for who and what you want to be, unless they're based on need for approval, they're actually descriptions of who you are already. Only something is blocked and all of that. But that's a whole other zone. So what I wanted to emphasize is that, and I know I'm dominating the talk this time.
No, it's all good, man. It's all good. I like that. It's kind of like just wind them up and let them
relax,
go.
You know, you wind them up and let them go. Yeah.
I know. That's really what's in my head. It's like, let them go, man. So anyway, continue, please.
In my Substack posts, I've been emphasizing the idea of paradigm. A paradigm is based in Greek. It means example. It's how you see the world. It's how you formulate the world. It's how you structure it. So what's the model of the world for you? You can't like describe the world directly in any kind of coherent fashion. It's too complicated. So how do you simplify it down to its basics? And that's your paradigm. An esoteric paradigm usually involves what caused creation. So usually religions answer this. But it's like, if you want your magic to work, you have to be able to trace the causality as far back as you can comprehend. You can't just make up that, oh, that's just the field of magic and, you know, it spits out whatever I ask of it. You don't know what's behind the field of magic. You don't know what's behind anything. You need to step into it and say, no, I trace myself straight through into the source of creation. There's a mystical experience. I emerge from that, and that is my existential root. These other leeches and lemmings, and I don't know what they are, these alien beings and that try to tell me this, that, and the other, these so-called angels, they have nothing to do with anything. Because I don't see the source in them. Where is it? See, this is why opening your discernment is important. Because it's up to you to be able to discern where anything is coming from, whether it's a human being, a thought, an impulse, an energy that actually has presence, which could be an entity, and you might even see the entity in your vision or even in front of you, depending. It's sensory manipulation, anyways. So a paradigm is important, and that's why I notice that conservative people stick to their religious values, because it's very primordial faith. They can't, if you stick to your religious values and all of their demands and stick by it, your whole reasoning is going to be based on that. So you will be unshakable if somebody's trying to demoralize you and make you submit and manifest the reality that they want. So it's basically, yeah, it's the devil, we know. And you notice religious people are also the ones to believe that, well, there's demons over there. You know, it's there's really an influence that goes beyond some trite material explanation. And so at least there, even if it's very simplified, it helps. So you got to get rid of religion, of course. On the other hand, we also need to open our minds up and our hearts and all of that, but it can't be done artificially. This is something intimate and private. So the first level with genies doesn't need to be structured on a cross or all of that, and we recommend that you don't do that. But you need a paradigm that will sustain the genies, because the genies themselves as entities are going to, they do that even in the conventional occultist paradigm or model. They go, oh, how is your faith? You know, do you believe in Jesus? You know, or all of that, because that is the context. They're not asking about Jesus. They're asking, where do you base your existence? If existence is random and there is no reason for it or whatever, and it's just you struggling to survive, why should I even help you? You're just a loose cannon flying through the universe. You know, why would I listen to you and do anything? What's in it for me, in other words? Now, when you're connected though to source, that doesn't even come into play because you're a benevolent, radiating love and all of that. So the jinn can sense that and doesn't even ask questions. It's like, yes, master. That's when the jinn says yes, master, because the yes masters and yes, you're the one that can step on my throat, and make me do stuff. No, you are the master wise enough to be able to penetrate the veil of the unseen, and you're responding like a master, like a responsible human being. You're not flipping out, you're not threatening, you're not sputtering, you're not trying to hide behind the skirts of a higher authority. You're standing up, you're manning up, whatever your gender is. And you understand the secret of the Circle of Solomon. All of this has to do with the energy of presence, basically of anchoring earth to sky in the four directions, through your middle pillar, that's the fifth influence, the quintessence, and surrounded by the world, which is almost like a circle or a sphere around you. And it's living, so that's why they portray it as a serpent biting its tail. It's constantly moving and living and vibrating. And serpents abound in mystical literature because they represent vibrations. They represent wealth, vibrations, intelligence, creativity, dragons in the folklore across the board. And people would see these things. They wouldn't just, in certain states of consciousness, the clouds turn into dragons. You're not hallucinating. You're actually perceiving something in your mind which has no way, for example, it's coming through your eyes and your ears, but your brain centers of sight and sound are not they're not wired to make sense of it. So it has to go into other brain areas to make sense of it, and then it comes back as elements of sight and sound mixed together, like vibration. But it usually makes the most sense to your sensory capacity, to your touch, to your inner touch, the energy feeling, the energy sense that has to do with emotions and stuff like that. The more areas of the brain that this vibration can move through, the more raw material you have to interpret it. So you can interpret it like a space. You can interpret it like a rhythm. You can interpret it like a touch. You can interpret it like a muscle movement or a smell or any of the other senses, even as a spoken vibration. And that gives it identity because the more you interpret it, the more it becomes real to you. That feedback lends your awareness to the jinn, which wakes up. So the jinn is a whole different entity outside of human awareness. But once it comes into human awareness, you establish the portals that connect you to the world and your greater self. And this is how jinn evolution is working. What I noticed is that they actually cover all of the issues. But the secret is that we are one with our environment, that all of your relations are the bridge between the sense of you and the sense of everything else. Once these things start mixing and blending, you can expand and deepen the sense of you. And you can remove all of these influences because that's one revelation. It's why isn't life moving as I want it to? And it's not because everybody else wants something different. Most people want more or less the same thing to be happy. We all have the same pleasure centers. We just go about it in different ways. And that's creative. And that means that we have a complex tapestry of fulfillment that creates more opportunities of experience for everybody. It's just open-ended. And creativity is a joy and all of that.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes from you. We all want the same thing, man. We want to be happy. And yeah. So
okay.
I may go off the subject of where you're going, but you mentioned that you do not suggest anyone to summon 8 genies at once, and you don't suggest that somebody just start out doing what we're doing.
No.
So what would you suggest, or do you even want to talk about that just yet, about someone wanting to get into working with the genies, but they're a little iffy? Or because I have a student that and a good friend. He was a friend before he was a student, and he told me he got into it, and it was a guy in Poland, and into working with the Goetia.
Yeah.
And he said it was too much. I don't want to do that again. And so he just, went to the church, an Orthodox Christianity church. And then, it's like that's what he's into right now. And I'm like, okay, cool. But like, how would you suggest somebody to get into it if they want to?
First, if you get into it, you have to know where you stand. Is your paradigm, and that's why I talk about paradigms. Christianity is a paradigm. It basically tells you how the world was created, how to keep it going, and how it's going to end. So it's an example of existence of life, and it gives you a sense of behavior. Every religion is a paradigm. Every scientific theory is a paradigm. Political theories and philosophies are paradigms. Anything that gives you a worldview, maybe you can call it dharma, is a paradigm. Dharma is basically my approach to life. What's my dharma? It's not the same as my karma, which is how life beats me back, but it's an approach, and it's usually the true dharma is evolutionary, and it's individualizing, and it's becoming transcendent at the same time and becoming whole, and in a world that in itself is redeemed and whole. That's the dream. And in this dream, everybody can be fulfilled because we're all looking for the same thing, which means that there's no contradiction here. Because we are smart, we know that even on a material level on this planet, humanity is mature enough to create paradise. There are truly creative individuals who are empowered, who can be empowered, and whatever, if the world was normal, meaning that if you didn't have proliferation of the opposite, of all the bad stuff, of a consciousness basically that is pretending to be greedy, that is pretending to be the 7 deadly sins of I'm just getting angry, or I'm just lazy, or I'm just horny, but in reality it's just I hate everything and want it stepped on. So I'm going to parody all the emotions and sensations and call them sins because I'm going to crap on them. And then I'm going to parody everything else, and then I'm going to just sorry, we're just messed up human beings. No matter what we do, we just deserve to end it. So there is that. And people think that this is rare and that it's an extreme and even paranoia. But you can't explain the suffering on this planet that, aside from nature, human beings have enough now that they can alleviate it, but they don't. And they make it worse, and it's in a controlled demolition almost. And the most basest of selfishness, so to speak, proliferates, not because it's bad, but because it's being perverted. And it all amounts to disconnection from your true self. And this doesn't mean have faith and believe in this or in that. It means that there is a way to awaken self-recognition that is independent of compromise. You don't have to justify your existence to anything. And that alone is something where a lot of people need to confront, because they'll notice that if they even think that way and really, really focus, they may start feeling anxiety or fear, or yes, I do have to justify my existence, or something. Or something is wanting, I can't just be. I mean, how can that happen? I'll be a scourge on the universe, or they'll hate me, or I'll be useless. I want to be useful. I'm a tool. So there's a lot of things that need to be brought to the surface, because you can be manipulated. You can become a handle. Just because you open up your awareness and reach out to these specific jinn, astrologically coordinated, does not mean that what's going to contact you is them. What you're doing is preparing so it is them. So if somebody opens up their awareness, it's almost like magic. Sometimes it's like taking drugs. You do the ritual and it stimulates the subconscious, but you haven't really owned what you're doing consciously. So if you're in a Christian belief system with jinn or demons, that's going to come to bite you. Because it's not like the jinn or demons. It's like, no, you're going to actually call a demon, because that's what you think is going to happen. Come. Your image is going to be demonic. So you have a lot of petty projections coming out of this that may need time. I purified them, but it took me a decade, and I didn't know half as much as I do now, or a fraction. But if you go to esoteric archives on the internet and find the original English manuscript, you're going to have seals that are far more reliable. They're simpler, they're a little weaker, but they don't carry that density that's projected from Victorian magicians with hang-ups, Victorian occultists with their own hang-ups. And then a lot of people, everybody who channeled into these things reinforced the image. So at the end, when your friend goes in and summons this thing, unless it's some kind of bow down to me because God is on my side or whatever, it's going to attack. And then it forces you to have this badass attitude, and you can never make a good connection with them. Every occultist that would comment on these things would either say they turn bad, or they have to be controlled, or they fade away. Just like if you don't use them much, then it'll be hard to contact them, and then they just become. And the only way to really keep them so they don't hurt you is to keep a distance where they don't manifest, where basically they are just thoughts in your head, or have a mental connection. That's what happens when you tune into the seals. If you tune into these seals from esoteric archives, make your own. You can embellish it a little bit, to make it your own, and they don't have to be exact. Consider them as signatures. So you're copying somebody's signature. And as you do this, you'll be able to connect with it and feel some energy, or maybe even have a dream from it. But over time, as you focus and use contemplative methods that are basic, you don't have to, the system doesn't have its own meditation approach. That is a given. These systems basically were like what you do with your meditation, but they don't teach you meditation. They don't teach you energy work. They teach you what you do with the energy work, the focus on the symbols, on the entities, on the breathing. But you can combine the two, though. You can take the basic energy work, alchemy, meditation progression that is revealed, that I've actually discovered in this translation of the Sefer Yetzirah, and that I find the same symbolism in the Book of Revelations, the same symbolism now in this other alchemy work called the fire of purgation, or the purifying fire. And this is all similar to how yoga works, or tantra, as long as although there are nuances in the symbolism. But that's okay. I don't want to complicate things. What I just want to say is that the paradigm is very simple. The paradigm is the nuclear family at a divine level. So you got the sacred father, mother, and male child from a certain direction. And then you have from the lower direction, from the earth, the same thing. The father, mother, and female child, the daughter. And these come together, the daughter and the son come together in creation. That's what humans basically are channeling. That's what humans are embodying. The very creation, the very yin and yang of creation come together as a self-aware being that is a perfect reflection of the full universe, but as male and female on Earth, in our species. Who knows how it manifests elsewhere, if it does. But there's a fundamental self-similarity here. That's why the father-mother paradigm works very well, because it's the macrocosm. It's like, okay, we all have families, biologically, so there must be a universal level of the same thing. And how does that work? Well, we're in the image and likeness of the universe itself. We are little universes, and walking around in the universe, relating to all the aspects of the universe, which are partially aware or unaware. And in this, we can purify both the universe and ourselves. And we can create universes. We have the power to create self-aware entities just by projecting our own awareness into a pattern. Now, these are going to be energy forms. Humans can create thought forms. It's very, very well known in occultism, and modern occultism especially, that you can meditate or focus on the energy between your hands and visualize a ball, and then you can start programming this. Usually emotionally. Usually just say, I'm really pissed, and throw it at somebody. Or, I'm really horny, and here's it, somebody will pick me up now. or I'm really desperate for money. And that's the one most people want to know, and throw it at what, a banker, and they'll pay you, give you money. No, a lot of these things need deeper level introspection and discernment. And there is no methodology to cultivate discernment other than opening your awareness, and opening it to the sense that you can combine consciousness, energy, conscious breathing, and your sense of biological beingness, the body sense, the deep energies of the sexual energies, tactile energies, the five senses. All of these are experiences. And these things can be condensed to form anything. So when you actually summon the genies, you're actually creating a doorway for something to come and embody it. And the assumption is that it's a bad thing. But in this case, it isn't, because the genies are symbolically fortified with the divine names at the same time. So, the 6-letter name that we put around the seal. And this connects it to the cause of creation that you're already experiencing through the mantra that you're doing in the beginning, So we have a mantra of Elohim Haim or something, which is basically a divine name. And there's other ones given in the text that have 42 letters, so they're connected directly with the process of creation as far as that symbolism goes. But the mantra is just meant to give you a vibratory sense of divine awareness, because Elohim is just a way of saying whatever's causing anything to happen. Anything that's to happen that's living within the living medium of creation, there's a cause behind it. There's a power behind it. This is the current, the energy that makes it move. And this is this is specifically applied to life, to your consciousness, to your awareness, and to your life force. So this energy is something that we acknowledge, and then we go to the jinn and say, okay, this is where I'm coming from. And the jinn turn back and say, okay, how do we connect? Well, I offer my organ energies. Now, this may sound pretty freaky to most people, but it's actually you're infusing specific energies of your physical orientation into the cardinal points, because these are specialized. The cardinal points have different qualities. And recently I found this grimoire called the Book of Spirits, where you have a lot of the spirits of the Goetia in there, but it's a far older one. And it's supposed to be like one of the original texts where, of these genies, of these jinn. But this book basically has the 4 rulers. And these 4 rulers have different qualities. The East, for example, encompasses all of evolution. You make changes at a very deep level, but it's not specific. Whereas the South is a specific manifestation of your own individual being. It'll connect you to your body. It'll connect you to, treasure on earth. It'll connect it to other entities, and it has a more specific way. And then the West is even more embodied, where you can actually cleanse your subconscious of negative influences. Now, these things are aspects of the rulers that a lot of occultists who are summoning them try to personalize, but they're not easy to personalize. What you do basically is understand what the ruler is. The ruler is a personification of the connection between heaven and earth at a cardinal point. What is the north? The north is the pole. It's the pole star, and you see all the other stars rotating around it. So it's the axis of the planet. So if it's the axis of the planet, it's also your axis. But it's also the midnight point. It's also everything hidden. It's also the winter solstice, where it's the coldest day of the year. And during this whole period, energy is taken from the physical realm as the plants fall asleep and moved into the metaphysical realm. The underworld actually comes alive during the autumn and winter months. That's why Halloween is celebrated. That's almost like a great day of, oh, look, the underworld now. It's because all the leaves are falling from the trees and the trees are falling asleep. The frequency of the plants is not the frequency of sunshine. It's the frequency of sleep. It's the frequency of dreams. The very plants of the earth are modulated in such a way that they connect with our own nervous system. Our awareness and plant awareness is connected. Same thing with animals, but plants are upright. I'm talking about trees mostly. So when trees release their leaves, the sap gets concentrated into the root. So then the whole dynamic of energy of the trees and the earth and sky is different. And the trees are asleep during the winter, and they have a dream time, and they wake up in fairyland. To the tree, they live in fairyland where all the leaves are out, and they have a different sun shining, and all of the fairies appear, so people can actually make a transit, can fall into a coma and enter the fairyland where time is on a whole different level. And so this is the underworld where you can be in a trance and experience it as a dream time beyond your body or within your body, however you want to frame it, or if you're one with it in the waking state, which is a challenge unto itself. But the whole point is that you're moving. This transformational alchemy begins at level 3. Level 1 and 2 are the levels where you can actually handle a jinn, where you can handle 2 jinn, where you can handle jinn who are of the same rank or planetary attribution, because they're all similar somehow. And you can actually move through all the 72, but one at a time, so you understand what they are, so you know they can communicate with you, and so you can identify their energies. Then, if you really want to tune in, you do it the tantric way. You use the imagery that they have. For example, like I said, face of a lion, riding a bear, screaming hallelujah, whatever, cracking the whip, holding 3 snakes up his nose. And this image, as you focus on it, these are all symbols. You don't have to know rationally what the symbols are, but focusing on them in a mindful manner and just absorbing it. And then pretend that the symbols are energy, or they give you a feeling, and that they're absorbed into your being. And from the symbols, then you refine them in your awareness, and then this presence attains human form, just like Furkas did with that Clint Eastwood form. Each and every one, but you got to focus on their imagery. And then you look at their offices and everything else. And with that imagery, it's called refining. And refining is where you actually turn the impulse of the jinn, the abstract impulse, into a personification that you can actually call human and relate to, and eventually becomes your friend. And in this sense, this is something that's a distinct process, because the grimoires themselves, they don't go, well, summon them and demand he's human. No, you basically summon this thing in the raw form. That's a collective energy that's beyond human, that's not alien, but it's certainly not personifiably relatable. And you open up to it in a state of awareness, like you try to cultivate with the mantra. That's how you do it, because you take your pure consciousness that's free of thought, that's free of any conception, and just weave it through the presence of the entity as if it's you looking out of its eyes. So you're looking out of its eyes to yourself, and yourself is looking back at it, and the lines almost blur. But in reality, what happens is that you are sharing your humanity with this abstraction, and so the abstraction is accommodating. If you don't do that, the abstraction is going to become not so accommodating, and there's going to be psychological friction, and that's going to be translated as hostility. And possibly you will shut down, just like before we talked, I tried to turn on Skype, it kept shutting down. And it's like that. The genie will just shut down, or something else will come in and pretend it's the genie. That's even warned in the grimoire. It can happen. So you need to be able to work with the genies in a way that first addresses your own psychology, because the genies will teach you psychic abilities and they will open you up. And you've had these experiences too. You were almost like, wow, magic is easy. You just intend this and do that and it happens,
Yeah.
And then they take you to the next level where all of a sudden either shit shuts down or you have to change your tactics or your strategy even. So it's a progression. So we're beginning at a phase that's quite advanced, and we're going to talk about the advanced phase. That's why we're not really giving instructions. What we're offering is a kind of paradigm that you're able to start with, certain things that you can do that are not specific, but if you understand occultism and have some experience with it, you might be able to work it out. Later on, we can get more specific, but we need to move from the general to the more specialized. And at the same time, since Jay is doing this work, and I'm not specifically doing this work, but I am crafting it, interacting with it, because I connect with genies differently. You have to, when you're fabricating something like this, because you have to be able to connect in different other ways. You can't be dependent on just one thing when you're crafting a system. It's almost like you need another reference frame. It's almost like building a space station. You need to have another spaceship to go out to carry all the pieces, to put them there and then put them together. It doesn't happen by itself. So in that sense, a paradigm helps because it will protect you from the bullshit. A paradigm is basically fundamental principles that can be found in most people are afraid of this because they think, oh, this is the general New Age religion or something. And it's like, no, this will protect you from the general New Age religion because all you need is the principle. You don't need a dogma. The paradigm just says yin and yang. Don't you see it in nature? Polarities. Don't you see that things flow and from top to bottom? There's gravity, there's fields. Things move from point A to point B. That means there's plus and minus. That means there's yin and yang. That means energy flows. You need to incorporate this into your understanding of the world, of course. So then you look at your personal life and go, well, there's gender polarities. That's pretty big. So maybe gender polarities is the way that these fields and forces understand themselves. How does the positive pole of a magnet understand itself if it were self-aware? Is it male? Is it female? Something similar. Well, Hermetic wisdom, which is basically all of these sages that have, undergone cultivation, that their intuition opened up to a certain understanding, they say yes. Not only is the macrocosm and the microcosm reflect each other and, patterns keep repeating themselves in a fractal reality, not only is everything contained in every little part, but everything is as biological as we feel it is. We're just humans experiencing that, but everything is biological. Everything is generating. Everything is sexual. Everything is experienced as joy and artistically pleasing and whatever and meaningful and poetic. All our human ideals are actually aspects of nature expressed in different ways. This is what Hermetic wisdom says. Basically, the highest mental ideals cannot be alien from the lowest debased instincts. It's a continuity. It's a continuum. One of them is the foundation whenever you're in physical reality, the base instinct, so to speak. And the other one is where you connect to the life that keeps it going, the crown, and where you have the so-called authority, the connection to source, the causality in yourself to be able to guide how events go. Because we human beings, we're not just victims of fate. We can rest and just let the river take us, but that's a matter of choice. But there are conditions, and there are conditions where you can enter the esoteric without worrying about things. And something like faith in Jesus is one way to do it. But you can step back from that without having to give yourself over, to give over everything in order to just make it through. That also kind of cultivates a sense of dependency where the true Christ consciousness or the true inner soul that's waking up and challenged to be woken up, well, this wants you to take a stand. It wants you to be your own authority. And it wants you to do it in a way that's not going to hurt you. And it's not going to hurt anybody else because the golden rule applies. You don't want other people to be hurt, not because it's bad, but because it sucks. It rains on your parade. It rains on everything. It's not, oh, that's selfish. forget the term selfish. When you are connected with everything, selfish and selfless fuse into a single thing, because you're everywhere, your interests are everywhere, and at the same time, you are imposing on no one and nothing. They're free to do whatever, because you naturally blend with your environment in a way that is fulfilling to both of you. Even if you're facing adversity, at least you're getting somewhere in that facing of adversity. It's not just, oh, I'm being attacked again, or I'm being hexed or cursed or whatever. No, this is like, well, the universe is leading me through this adversity because there's nowhere else I can go. I need to create more pathways if I don't want it. And in that sense, just like you with the adversity and all of the relationships and all of those traps and the sacrifice issue, where human beings some of them seem to have the ability to subtract not just life force, but fortune, the ability to have good luck, for example, the ability to generate favorable circumstances with your own intention gets sucked dry and you end up having bad luck. Basically, somebody craps their own hatred into your subconscious and you end up hating yourself, thinking that's innocent, criticizing yourself more than usual, feeling bad, feeling whatever. And in the end, you end up in some destructive, addictive behavior or get cancer, or in self-defense, become a psychopath and externalize the hatred, blaming everything else. So we're stuck in this quandary. And as you open up in this independent fashion, because true occultists are adventurers, they're not evil people. This is not an adventure like a frivolous thing. They are explorers. They are adventurers like explorers used to be. But at the same time, this is evolution. They know that on a different level, they say this is an intentional thing, that I need to experience the fulfillment that I want in the ideal way. And this is a good thing. This is a divine thing. This fulfillment needs to be, shall we say, shaped by certain circumstances that are not going to leave any stone unturned as to what's going on, as to what I need to do, as to how I need to engage in order to have the outcomes I desire. And I am not separate from the world. That's why it's important. You're not just an ego going out, manifesting, having powers, talking to jinn, doing whatever. You're actually open and willing to lower the boundaries of your definitions of self, because you're far stronger than that. That's where the soul emerges. The soul is that aspect of you that goes straight to the divine, without religions. It goes straight to the truth, straight to the meaning of love and everything that we're all seeking, because we're all somewhat disconnected. We don't want to connect enough so much that we lose ourselves, like some people claim we have to. But we do want to connect enough to remember where we came from, so we can express that through who we are. We're remembering ourselves. All of these are cliches, of course, but we're remembering ourselves. And I believe through some experience that I've had and through experience that I've shared with you, that we can convey certain basics for free and to see who picks up, to see if they can be picked up. These podcasts, these talks, these monologues of mine with you just window dressing on the other end,
No, man. This is just another direction that you're experimenting with, and if you like this, run with it, man.
Well, I wanted to have some impact for you too, as well, in the sense that you're doing this work, so I don't want it to go over your head. I want you to be able to incorporate it into what you're doing, because it also connects directly to the genie work, but it can also be applied to anything else.
Right.
For example, all of the yin yang stuff, it goes far deeper. And eventually, when we go into the court cards, the tarot cards, you're going to be opening up to archetypes that go deeper into the whole family model. But it's not like a stupid nuclear family on human terms, it's not that. That's just, it's basically yin and yang.
Well,
And
we already played with that, and as I understand it, we set that aside and started working on what we're working on right now. But the king and the queen representing, like, the king was an
yeah, it's a
archangel.
future thing. It's a future thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and the
I got,
way
and I told you about this, but I got good results from that. I mean,
yeah.
they didn't last,
No.
but nothing really
See,
ever
to
happened.
make
But
them
man,
last, we need to do the crosses. You need to progress alchemically. We need cultivation. And cultivation cannot be frivolous. It's very simple. But people tend to want results so fast that instead of really exploring what the cultivation is doing, what this energy sense is doing, and how it's doing it, you're getting to know yourself basically at a very primal level of tactile, instinctive connection.
yeah, and the thing is, it's like, I don't know what results obviously each individual is going to want, but I mean, as long as I get something, anything, it just makes me happy. Even if it's a
Well,
bad result, it's still like, okay, well, at least that was something.
first
And
off, yeah. Well, sorry for interrupting,
it's
but
okay.
first off, the people who are into it, again, you don't come in cold and get into this. You need to understand at least a little bit of what your psychic experience is about, a little bit of cultivation to be able to sit with your quiet mind for a little bit, to do Tai Chi, something, to be able to focus on something so your imagination isn't running constantly. A lot of occultists in the West in modern times are dependent on the ritual to bring them into a state of awareness where shit happens. And the ritual isn't always going to do that, or it might deceive you. You can't be dependent on that because what's your conscious mind doing? If you don't involve your conscious mind, it's almost like you're not responsible for the outcome. And then you can have unpredictable outcomes. But if you do involve your conscious mind, because it's so censored and biased and filtered and possessed basically and conditioned, your results are weak. And so how do you strengthen? When you do strengthen your results, what you realize is that this means that you're opening the gates to the underworld, that your results are getting stronger as the gates open wider because the energy comes in and that's what you're connecting. But as you open up to the underworld, you're opening up to the no holds barred underbelly of human collective awareness. And that's a scary place at first, but it doesn't have to be. And the jinn especially understand that. They're like, yes, we're moving through this, but by the time you finish and can condense it all into the court cards or, however it's going to be condensed, because you can, once you do the genies, you don't keep going and referencing 72 different entities unless you want to, unless you have something creative to do, because you can't do that. You can create pentagrams with them along the circle. You can create squares. You can create hexagons, octagons, and the relationships will always interact and be meaningful in accordance to the geometry that you're using. And this has implications. So the sky's the limit, really. I'm just using a square or a cross because it's the most defining X marks the spot bullseye dynamic you can use, and you want something to keep you grounded. That's the problem is not the underworld falling into the pit and not being able to get out. The problem is actually floating away without any anchor or reference. The problem is losing your sense of purpose and being carried by the winds and being overwhelmed by stuff. So having an axis and an anchor and a grounding and a center is of utmost importance. And it's not just something you imagine. It's also just the way you view the world, the concept of integrity. We've talked about that. Then you can amplify the energy moving through your body and open your meridians, and it's not going to flip you out because it's okay to have intense life force. It's okay. We used to say that before, yeah, I'm going through a lot of feelings that are uncomfortable, but they're just feelings. They're not going to kill me. As long as I don't stick bad thoughts on them that beat me up worse than the feelings ever could, the feelings are just being tormented because they're forced to imagine the outcomes these thoughts are creating. And so it's that human beings don't just know themselves at a personal level. That's a whole other story. They don't even know themselves at a level of being human. What it means to feel, they do, and it comes off as some big, profound insight when it should be natural. Or we take things for granted, and they don't have the impact until the years go by, and we just lose it's unimportant. But it was the most basic, fundamental thing when you were a kid. All of these things that you had instinctively that were basic, and your connection to the world, the livingness, the miracle of life, just all of these things that people notice when they're younger, full of vitality, or even children, poetic things, meaningful things that should be philosophical, and then they just fade away because we become preoccupied with our weakness and what is proper regarding our weakness. So this is a kind of work in progress. These podcasts are going to be, massaging things. Like I said, the talk about the paradigms or esoteric models. But in this case, I want something simple. The Indian and the Chinese methods are too complicated. They don't have to be. They're actually not in some way. There's just a lot involved. But here we have a basic thing. We want to open up human awareness to the underworld. And that needs to have hemispheric balance. You got to basically be in the center of your being. You can't be lopsided, too analytical, or even too intuitive. And that's also attained. And when you attain that, you open up the energies of heaven and earth. The Easterners call that Kundalini, but that's also a very undefined type of thing with variations of interpretation. But it's very tied into the same dynamics that the jinn represent, in the sense that the whole life and the whole religion are a representation of a plug-in of the cosmos to the earth and the purpose of humanity. And it's been distorted somewhat. But the main thing is that the only way there is going to be a positive change is if it's a natural one. And it's going to be a kind of winding road, a serpentine path, you might say, because you can't really call a spade a spade. There are no spades here. Sometimes there are, but then you might take it out of context. So you got to be very careful. And that's why we walk around and use imagery and beat around the bush sometimes, because this isn't a factual science. It's not about the methodology. It's about the spirit of it. So I think that's okay for today. And thanks for your presence, Jay. I know you were a great support. I got Jay here on visual, so he helps me like I'm actually talking to somebody. He doesn't see me, so kudos to his performance, but we don't have to show the images and stuff. The thing is, though, I'm kind of happy where this is going, and we'll see how it turns out. Stay tuned, because we're going to go deeper, and at the same time, we're going to try to make it simpler than whatever I've said. My premise is that you don't need complicated techniques, but you need a level of complexity in your understanding, in your how you view things. It doesn't have to be intricate, whatever, but you just go outside the box for real. You can stimulate your own being through your awareness to actually reach levels that you were meant to reach. And not only reach them, but to do something with them that's purposeful, flexible in the sense of what your biases are and what your preconceptions are, but true to your moral compass at the same time. You can actually benefit from this. And when I say this, it's going to be probably not immediate for most listeners to realize what this is about, because this is a compilation of a lot of descriptions that we're going to make. And we're going to boil it down because, it's, like I said, we want to get away from the cliches of, yes, self-realization, be all you can be yourself, be this is all, you're the magic. These things are true, but they actually really make no sense in our day-to-day perceptions. So maybe we can maneuver that. Maybe there's a way to harness our creativities where they can make sense. But anybody who has ears to hear and who has a working intuition can incorporate what they hear into what they're doing until the day comes when it is going to precipitate together into greater clarity, because we're gaining more experience, and so am I. And maybe next time we're going to have an even dialogue with Jay about stuff and see how it goes, because he does have to give me a kind of account of what he's doing with all the material I've sent him and stuff.
Right.
Because I've been writing hundreds and hundreds of pages and sending them and probably not expressing, learning along the way how to express.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. Anyways, thanks for listening. Hope to see you again next time.
All right. Adios.